So let's talk about the web hosting company Ultahost. Why? Because it's the perfect example of a company where the expert reviews tell one story and the actual user reviews tell a completely different one. We're going to use this clash to figure out a super important skill: how to tell the difference between a slick marketing promise and what's really going on. Let's get into it.
You know the feeling, right? You're about to buy something, and one review says it's the best thing ever, a total game changer. The very next one says it's an absolute disaster. It's confusing. Well, using Ultahost as our case study, we're going to unpack what happens when the professional analysis and the real-world customer feedback seem to be describing two totally different products.
All right, first up, let's look at the promise. This is the shiny, polished version of the story, the one told by the experts. In this case, we're looking at a super detailed review from the industry site Host Advice, and it gives us that perfect first impression.
And wow, what a first impression it is. Host Advice slaps a near-perfect 4.9 out of 5 on Ultahost. And this isn't just one person's opinion, it's based on their expert ratings plus over 2,000 user reviews on their own platform. I mean, with a score like that, you'd think, case closed, right? This looks like an absolute top-tier provider.
And when you dig into the details, the picture gets even better. Look at this. Prices and support both get a stellar 9.5 out of 10. That's because they have no hidden fees and you can reach their support team 24/7. The only place they even dip a little is performance with an 8.0. And even there, the reviewer just notes that while the uptime is solid, there are some faster hosts out there.
So let's just recap the expert's view. The pros are seriously tempting. You've got no hidden fees, which is huge, fantastic customer support, an interface that's incredibly easy to use, plus you get a free domain, a free SSL certificate, and they'll even migrate your website for free. This paints a picture of a company that's helpful, transparent, and just a fantastic value.
Based on all that, you'd think this is a no-brainer. It seems like a clear winner, a total slam dunk. But that's only the first story. Let's see what happens when we look at a different source.
Okay, now we pivot. Let's explore what might be the reality. And to do that, we're heading over to the Wild West of reviews, Trustpilot. This is where things get complicated.
And whoa, this slide says it all, doesn't it? A massive 75% of reviews are 5-star. People love it. But then look at the other side. A huge 20% chunk are 1-star. They hate it. There is almost no one in the middle. No 2s, 3s, or 4s to speak of. It's either a perfect experience or a complete catastrophe. That kind of extreme polarization is a massive red flag. It screams inconsistency.
So, let's start with the good stuff. Here's a 5-star review that sounds exactly like what the expert said. This user praises the professional and responsive support team and says the infrastructure has been stable. See? This lines up perfectly. This is the story those 75% of reviewers are telling. But then you get this. A 1-star review from Arnold Safari that tells the complete opposite story. He calls it the worst hosting experience I've ever had. He talks about random server shutdowns and constant downtime for his business website. This couldn't be more different from the promise of stability we just heard.
So when you lay it all out side by side, it's just wild. The fans are praising the exact same things the critics are attacking. One group says support is responsive and professional. The other says it's generic and unhelpful. One says the servers are stable, the other says they're constantly down. It's like they're talking about two completely different companies. So what is really going on here?
All right, to figure this out, we have to become detectives. The truth is usually hidden between the lines, so let's start connecting some dots between these two very different stories.
And boom, here is our first huge clue. This is an official notice right on Ultahost's Trustpilot page from Trustpilot itself. It says the company's rating is unavailable because they breached the platform's guidelines. Now, we can still see the reviews, but this is Trustpilot stepping in and putting up a warning flag. That puts a pretty big question mark over the authenticity of all those glowing 5-star reviews, doesn't it?
Okay, now let's jump back to that expert review for a sec. Because if you dig into the fine print, the methodology, you find this little nugget. The performance test, the one that gave them a good score, wasn't run on a real customer's website. It was run on Ultahost's own company website. Of course, their own homepage is going to be perfectly optimized and stable. That's a world away from the shared server where your actual website would live. This could easily explain the gap between the expert's good rating and all those user complaints about downtime.
But just to make things more complicated, it's not all bad news. Here's a fascinating twist. Ultahost's support team is extremely active on Trustpilot. They publicly reply to nearly every single review, good or bad. They aren't hiding from the criticism. So on one hand, you have people complaining about getting unhelpful support, but on the other, the company is right there in the open, talking to everyone. It's a real paradox.
So, after all that, what are we supposed to do with this mess of conflicting information? Well, let's turn this whole case study into a practical toolkit that you can use for, well, pretty much any service you're thinking about buying.
It's a simple 4-step guide. Step 1, never ever just look at the big score at the top. It doesn't tell the whole story. Step 2, go straight for the drama. Read the 5-star reviews and the 1-star reviews. That shows you the best case and the worst case scenario. 3, look for context. Are there any official warnings from the platform? And how is the company responding to feedback? And finally, step 4, look for patterns. What specific compliments or complaints keep popping up over and over again?
All right, let's boil this all down. Here's what you really need to remember. Think of expert reviews as a good starting point, but they are not the final word. User reviews show you how a service performs under real-world pressure. If you see extreme love it or hate it polarization, that's a big warning sign for inconsistency. And you should always take official platform warnings seriously. Finally, how a company responds to criticism can tell you just as much as the criticism itself.
Ultimately, this whole thing leaves us with one critical question. The next time you're about to click buy based on a bunch of reviews, take a second and ask yourself, are you just reading the polished marketing promise? Or are you willing to dig a little deeper to find the messy, complicated, but